Then we'll start the recording here. Okay. Well, Hare Krishna to all the devotees that are on the call, and I'm sure I'll get a few more coming on, and all the devotees that are going to be listening. We are doing the series of the beauty and the messiness of the Sadhaka's journey, and today we have a very special guest who has been a dear friend of mine for many, many years, and I'm very grateful that she agreed to come on, because I know it's challenging sometimes for her to do interviews. So this is Pranada. I'm going to, many of you know her from the Sangha, but some of you may not. And after this interview, I think you'll have a lot more acquaintance with her and probably want to go out and get her a new book, which we'll talk about as we go along in the interview. So I'm going to read your bio.
So Nanga Manjari says that she can't record yet.
And I don't know, but the setup of the translation.
Oh, the translation got stopped. That's very strange. Let me get you back on here. I wonder why that happened. Okay, you're back on there. So now you should have both of them. Is that good? Okay, great.
She's good.
Okay, so I'm going to read Pranada's bio. So she joined in Los Angeles Temple to serve Prabhupada at the age of 17. And that was back in 1975. And she was accepted as Srila Prabhupada's disciple in 1976. She distributed Srila Prabhupada's books in Los Angeles airport for many years. And she served the Back to Godhead magazine in various roles for 30 years, and served the BBT, the Bhakti Vedanta Book Trust, in various ways for nearly 10 years. She was a board member of ISKCON Foundation, Gita Nagari Press, the Alachua Temple, BTG, the Alachua Learning Center, and in her spare time, you can ask her what she was doing. And in her service at Gita Nagari Press, she was honored to be able to produce the last 2 volumes of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita for the BBT. So some pretty significant services that she's done in her past years. Beginning in 1990, she published, edited, and financed the international quarterly newsletter called Priti Lakshanam. And that was a little newsletter to educate devotees about the role of women in ISKCON and provide an avenue for devotees to communicate with the leadership around topics of concern. And in publishing that newsletter, she encountered many social needs within the international devotee community. And in response, she began publishing personal ads to facilitate devotees finding marriage partners. She founded Adopt a Child, that served to place devotee children from disadvantaged families into devotee homes who could care for them. And with another devotee, Sudharma Devi Dasi, she helped establish the ISKCON Women's Ministry, now known as the Vaishnava Ministry. And then in 1993, She was elected as the Krishna Community Fund president with the specific duty to head up an effort to build a new temple. To spearhead this, she brought together a team of devotees. A fundraising campaign began in November of 1993, and building plans were finalized, an architect approved them, and a contractor was chosen. They opened the doors mid-morning on Janmashtami Day in 1996. So very beautiful temple in Alachua, and Pranada was very instrumental in making that happen. She worked with Tamara, Parni, Manoram, and Radha to launch Krishna.com in 2000. So Krishna.com is a, it had, at one time, it was like the place to go for information about Krishna consciousness. That was before social media, so many different social media platforms, and a lot of blogging was happening on there, and a lot of articles and things about Krishna consciousness for newcomers and for devotees. And then in 2002, she became the co-director of the BBT Special Projects, which was formed in response to the preaching strategy she presented to the BBT trustees called the Bhakti Campaign. Wow, she's done so much. Okay, in 2020.
It's going on a long time.
It's just, I've known her and I knew she did all these things, but to see them all on a piece of paper and read them, it's pretty it's just amazing. So then in 2020, she published the anthology of 30 writers entitled The Emergence of Women's Voices in ISKCON, which is a written documentary of the experiences of first-generation pioneer women of ISKCON. She had a private library of these documents, likely the only complete one in the world. She sensed it was time to pass the torch of wisdom and lessons learned to future generations, knowing that they would benefit from senior Vaishnavas who have thought deeply on the topics of women's service in the institution. To have the facility to offer these volunteer services as an entrepreneur, she managed 2 successful businesses to support her family. She now spends her time deepening her sadhana and writing for an outside audience. In 2018, she released her first book, Wise Love, Bhakti, and the Search for the Soul of Consciousness, which won several awards and was republished by the BBT South Africa. Her second book, Bhakti Shakti, Goddess of Divine Love, was just released on the first full moon day of this year, and she's working on 2 other books. So just put that up there so you can see this is the beautiful book that she just released, Bhakti Shakti. And that is on Amazon. And I'm sure it will be translated into Spanish very soon.
It has been translated into Spanish.
It's already already. Okay.
And it's been proofread and it's in layout right now.
Wonderful. So see, she's ahead of the game.
Not me. The devotees who are kindly interested in giving their time.
So Pranada met Tripurari Swami in 2013 at Archana City's house in Prabhupada Village, and developed a very wonderful Shiksha relationship with him over the years. And he also was a lot of her inspiration to help her kind of launch her into her writing of these books. So Yeah,
We
amazing.
should have gone with a short bio, I think.
I don't know. I think it's important because I would say, I know a lot of devotees and a lot of very amazing devotees who've done amazing things, but Pranada just stands out as somebody that puts her mind to something and she is able to accomplish it. It doesn't matter if she doesn't know how to write a book. She decided she wanted there to be bridge books, and she tried to form a group of, find people to do that, and she couldn't find them. So what did she do? She taught herself how to write. And then not only did she teach herself how to write, but she also taught herself how to do all the things that you have to do to market a book and building a website. I mean, it's just incredible. Nothing stops her. And in reading her, the bio we read, you can see she's a very accomplished devotee, has done so many things to help the Vaishnav community. And of course, her involvement in ISKCON, she's also very involved in Sri Chaitanya Sangha as well now. And she has just really, I would say, made it a better place for women in the movements, and for the future to come also. So I'm very grateful for all the work you've done and all the things you've, helping to build the temple here in Alachua. I mean, that's amazing. So many amazing things you've done. So I want to start up with questions for you as to kind of going back to your early life. In your starting your journey, did you have any cues in your life that would help you understand that you were meant for a spiritual path?
Yeah,
Yeah.
really young. Yeah, I became clear at around, in fact, I was thinking about this also. When I was around 8 years old, I saw a TV program. We had just got a color TV. That was something new. And I think it was a Sunday, I'm not sure, but there was a program and I was by myself watching this program, and it had these old manuscripts on some kind of a beautiful cloth, and there was a hand turning the manuscripts, and the narrator said, "These precious books of wisdom are being lost to the world, and the language that they're in, few people know, and those who know are dying, and we could lose this body of knowledge." And I turned the TV off and I sat there, and I was really very disturbed. I was really worried, and I thought, how could adults let this happen? That something as precious as spiritual knowledge could be lost to human society. And for some reason, this impacted me so deeply that I became obsessed. I think this is like a character trait that gets me to do these things, is a little obsession, which is actually a negative, can be quite a negative, something I've had to work on as a devotee. But I became absolutely distraught with this thought. And I didn't tell anybody, but I felt like I was desperate for that not to happen. And I began to pray in a very almost frantic way. Please show me these books of knowledge. Show me the absolute truth. And I felt very lost and very worried that this was never going to happen in my life. And I was about 8 or 9 years old, but I was very, very disturbed. And in hindsight, what's really interesting is I looked at the calendar when this occurred in my life, And Srila Prabhupada made his journey to San Francisco, his first journey on an airplane to San Francisco, right at that time. And I was born in San Francisco and was in Marin County in my childhood home. So that means my spiritual master was coming. I didn't know it, and I'm a child, but I feel like my spirit there, my trajectory to come in touch with my spiritual master had begun, and it was almost like his coming was impressing on me, and then this prayer overtook me, and this prayer became so powerful that after some time, I mean, I stopped playing jacks and jump rope and child games. I just became obsessed. How am I going to get this knowledge? And I remember my parents had this small little Bible in the living room where we never went, and it was very hard. And I remember trying to read it, not making any sense out of it at all. And I had this idea that I needed to find the absolute truth, which I have no idea where I even heard that term, because I was in Catholic school, and, we were, normal, quote, normal Americans, but I was looking for the absolute truth. And I became so frantic about needing to find the absolute truth that I finally began my prayer by saying, I knew I needed, maybe if I made a commitment, that then the answers would come and the books of knowledge would be revealed to me. So then my prayer morphed into, if you just send me the books of the absolute truth, I will do anything. And it took me a few years to go there, because I had a sense that meant some kind of surrender that was going to be big. So I was hesitant to make that, add that to the prayer. But anyway, it was added to the prayer. And by the time I was, say, 12, I was quite beside myself. I still hadn't heard answers. The counterculture movement was at its height. I was very interested in adult conversations. That's where I would spend my time. My parents would have these two hippies over in the evening, and I would just hang out and listen to their conversations about everything going on in the world. And very early on, I realized politics were awful, because I saw John F. Kennedy murdered. I saw Bobby Kennedy murdered. I saw Martin Luther King murdered, and the war in Vietnam was going on. And it was very disturbing. I knew that there were no answers there. And so I was listening to these adult conversations and feeling like maybe I was getting closer to the truth, but they weren't really going. I felt like I was being educated, but not fully. And then I started listening to the music of the time. And then I was feeling like, yeah, it's speaking. There's some message here, and it's speaking to me, but still not feeling that wholeness. And then the evening conversations with the adults stopped. And so I went to my father when I was, at this time, I was 13. And I said, could we read spiritual books at night when you got home from work? And we could go on a journey together. And my father said, sure, we could do that. So we started reading everything that was out and about at that time. We read about Zen Buddhism, Be Here Now, Jonathan Livingston Segal, and we read the Bible. And my favorite was Jirdev and Ouspensky. I felt like I was getting close to the truth with these two spiritual teachers. But I felt frustrated because the knowledge seemed right, but there wasn't a path. And so how do you take that knowledge on? I felt that was lacking. So I started making trips into San Francisco by myself, which was quite a long journey. I'd have to take a bus into the Larkspur Harbor, take a boat into Sausalito or San Francisco, then Sausalito, to San Francisco, take a bus in San Francisco, and I visited the Zen Buddhism Center in San Francisco that had just opened. And, here I am, 13-year-old girl alone doing meditation, Zen meditation. And I thought, oh, this is interesting, and the teacher would walk around with this thing and hit students to wake up because they were sleeping. And I listened to some classes. I think like some of the big teachers were there at the time. And I went a second time thinking that I just needed to learn more. But I really felt like they were talking about the mind, but the mind wasn't it seemed to me that wasn't everything. So I remember my mother's girlfriend, who was younger than her, took me to the Jack Tar Hotel in San Francisco for a seminar by Werner Erhard, who is the founder of EST, and which later became Landmark. And he was speaking. There were about 250 adults, and he was explaining how he had this awakening on the Golden Gate Bridge, and he was going to be teaching people about it, and it was only going to be about this much money. And the audience was just, thunderous and applause. And I was looking around and thinking, what are they applauding? Everything he's talking about, I've already heard, and it's not revelatory. And it seemed to me that these adults were being taken in by this that wasn't fully. So I was really like, and my prayer was getting more and more intense, and I was not making progress. I was just,
you were just very, very precocious. Oh my God.
I was beside myself. So then I decided that I was going to go get the Autobiography of a Yogi for my father's birthday, which would have been his 34th birthday. I was turning 14. So he was just, 20 years older than me. So he was, for his 34th birthday, I decided I was going to go into Sausalito to the Tides bookstore and buy him Autobiography of Yogi. I wanted to get the hardbound version because it was all the rage. Everyone was talking about this book. So I went took the bus and the boat into Sausalito to the Tides bookstore, and I went and right up to the book, and I grabbed the book, and then I was like, something caught my eye down below the shelf, all the way on the floor, and I looked, and I was like, and I realized, oh my God, this is the first time I'm in a bookstore. And I was so taken by the books, I thought, well, maybe I should really find out what else is in the bookstore, because I was looking for the books of the absolute truth. So I started looking around, and I was like, no, and I grabbed the Autobiography of Yogi again. And again, I looked down, and I was like, what is that? And I picked up these two little books, and I turned them over, and there was this picture of this person from India who looked very saintly. And the first book was called Beyond Birth and Death. And the second was called Journey to Other Planets. And I looked at those two books, and I thought they were really calling me. But I was here to buy Autobiography of a Yogi. So I set them down, and I said, no, I'm buying Autobiography of a Yogi. So I grabbed the book again, and I turned to walk to check out. And I was like, no, I can't do this. Even though this was a hardbound book, it was the book I came for. Everyone was talking about it. I couldn't do it. I came back, and I put the book down, and I picked up the two little books again. And I was just like, I don't know. And then I finally just had to shut my mind off. And I said, okay, I'm getting these two books. So I took these two little books to the checkout, and I bought these two little books, and I went home, and I wrapped them up, and my father opened them up, and his face just dropped, and he just went, oh, and he looked at the other one, he went, oh, and he put them down, and I was just devastated. I was like, oh, I got the wrong books, and my father doesn't approve. And was very meaningful for me to have him approve. And I was so disappointed in myself that we didn't read those books. We never picked up those books. Then my father became very restless, and my parents became like hippies. And a couple years later, they announced that we were selling everything. We were going to buy a Jeep and a trailer, and we were going to travel to Honduras and start a scuba diving business. And we were leaving everything behind. And I was not finished even with the 10th grade at that time. And I was not happy because I wanted to finish school. And I was like, I do not want to go on this trip, but I felt obliged to go with my mother for different reasons on this trip, which turned out to be and my father was very much into the books of Carlos Castaneda's. And he just thought that those were the books. That was the truth. And so we were going to go by vehicle down into Mexico, travel into South America, meet one of his friends in Honduras, and start a scuba diving business. And he was sure we were going to meet some shamans. We were going to take some mushrooms and have revelations and find the truth. And I was like, okay, maybe, but I'm not really happy about this. So we take off, and my father had a problem with alcohol and drugs, and he wound up leaving us down there for some time. And while he was gone, there was a major hurricane which wiped out Honduras. And so we were no longer we were in Mexico at the time, and we were no longer going to Honduras because it was completely devastated by this hurricane. Then he landed and he said, well, we're going to go to Santo Domingo and do the business. So we went to the end of Mexico. By this time, we had just some few belongings, but now we were going to sell the trailer and the Jeep in Mexico and take a plane to Santo Domingo with just like maybe a suitcase, each of us, and that was it. So we go to Santo Domingo. That turned out to be quite an adventure. I learned scuba diving. I taught scuba diving. I took out scuba tourists on scuba dives. And, but I was just beside myself. Nothing, the spiritual thing didn't happen in Mexico. And now I'm almost 16 years old. My life is going by. I don't have the books of the absolute truth, and everything is ruined. And I was actually getting suicidal. I could not imagine living without being given the gift of spiritual knowledge. So we were there for a while. It was not working out well, and for the family, financially and otherwise. And I remember at one point, my father and mother said, well, let's invite your sister my sister had stayed back in California. Let's invite her for her birthday. We'll have a party. So she came, and she came with two boxes, boxes. And evidently we had saved those boxes. I had no idea that anything was left in California, but there were two boxes and she brought them. So I sat down and I opened up these boxes just to see what it was. And I thought it was just going to be a, whatever. And oh my God, I pulled out Beyond Birth and Death, An Easy Journey to Other Planets. And I took them like this, and I grabbed them and I said, oh my God, they followed me all over the world, and they're here, and I must take them now. And so I didn't show them to anybody. I hid them and I took them into my room. And then within a few days, I sat down with them and I was like, something is happening here. But I was having a hard time understanding the Sanskrit and everything that was being said. And it just wasn't completely gelling. So then I said, and plus here I am, I'm 16. I don't even have an education. I'm trying to read these profound books. And I decided I'll pull out I would look every word up in the glossary, and I was going to pull out a dictionary and look up every word as I read them. And so the second time I sat down to read them like that, and oh my God, everything shifted in that day. The whole world just collapsed in a very profound way. I wasn't the daughter of my mother and father. I wasn't the sister of my brothers. I was a spiritual being and this world was an illusion. And I just was introduced to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and everything just shifted so profoundly. Tears were coming down my eyes, and I thought, oh my God, that you've answered my prayer. You've answered my prayer. I've found the truth. I've found my path. I found my master. And it was a very profound experience. And that's how Prabhupada came for me the second time. This time he was coming with more force to pull me. And of course, I remembered that I had added to my prayer that if I found the absolute truth, I would surrender everything. So I was like, oh no, now what have I gotten myself into? What do I have to do now?
Oh my goodness.
And that was a heavy moment, because I felt that honesty was very important, and I could not betray that promise that I had made, and the gift had been given. And so, long story, we made it back into California a few months later, and I visited when we were in the airport, Kanchambala, whose husband Madhusudana just passed away. She gave me a mantra card with the address of the ISKCON temple in Los Angeles. So I went to the temple and went to the Sunday feast, picked up a Bhagavad Gita at the gift store, and felt like more and more connected to the path, but really like terrified to surrender. And I remember we were leaving the temple, and Rameshwar came up to us. He was a brahmachari at the time. And he started speaking to me. And then pretty soon, a lot of devotees were gathered around me listening to his preaching. And he was just going on about how there's a path, and there's, he was teaching me a lot, and but he was also demanding surrender. And he's like, why don't you stay? And I was like, oh God, no. Anyway, then I went home, and the whole time going home, I was crying because I knew I was going to have to surrender. This was it. And about 2 weeks later, I moved into the Los Angeles temple. So that's how Prabhupada saved me, and it gave me hope and a chance.
Such an amazing story that you have. She also has this all written in her memoir that she wrote some years ago, and we're hoping that we might be able to get her to put that out for publication in the near future. We'll talk more about that. Yeah, so beautiful story of how you came to Krishna, and obviously picking up where you left off from your previous lifetime, no doubt, with that early prayer of yours and that intense desire, really just welling up inside of you to find the absolute truth, whatever that meant to you.
Yeah, and then Prabhupada's books had that term in it, and then I knew,
right,
because he
right.
uses the term
He uses
absolute
that term,
truth.
absolutely.
And I had never heard that phrase before.
So
It just had come to me. So I was like, another
Yeah.
confirmation.
Yeah, another confirmation. Yeah. And I know when you first saw Prabhupada, your experience was meeting an old friend, seeing him and connecting with him.
That really solidified it, and it really has been it really has kept me on the course through like a lot of difficulties, is that being in Prabhupada's presence and being completely transported to another realm, just being in the same room as him, and having a tangible experience of the spiritual realm by hearing someone on a tape is different than hearing them in person. There's a different kind of transmission that affects the heart, and I think you can get as much, I do think, but it's a different experience, and it's a very profound one to sit in the presence of a realized soul that is transporting you. And then he, by chance, yeah, there's a funny story I can tell you, but before I tell you the funny story, I will say that he would go out on a morning walk every morning before greeting of the deities. And he would come down from his rooms. And so there would be a little band of us standing on the cement platform on the side of the temple where he would come down. Then he would get into his car and he'd go out for his walk. And so we would wait at the bottom of the stairs, and usually just a few women, and give him some flowers, pay obeisances, see him up close. And one day I decided that it was such a beautiful scene, I wanted to see it from a little bit of a distance. So I went, instead of standing right where he came down, I went to the other side of the car. And there was a little doorway to the other building right there. And there was only one person could stand there. And I thought I was hidden, actually. I thought I was hidden, and I was just taking in this beautiful scene of Prabhupada acknowledging the different devotees there and accepting their little offerings. And it was just so beautiful and so much love. And I just was in heaven watching this. And then Prabhupada got in the car, and all of a sudden, I realized he was looking at me, and I thought I was hiding. And I was, worried, like, oh my God, I've made myself visible, and that's awkward. But Prabhupada looked me right in the eye, and he held my eyes, and I was just stunned, because I felt like we were having a conversation with our eyes, and I didn't know how to respond, and I wanted to respond, and I was quickly trying to think, how am I supposed to respond, and what is being, and this was all very much of a flash, where I saw eternity, like how everything goes for eternity. And in that exact moment where that was transmitted, it was also that he was my friend. And I thought, that doesn't make any sense. He doesn't know me, and I'm trying to be a disciple, and how could we be friends? But it was such a powerful feeling that I was showing that we were friends and going to be friends in eternity. I was like overwhelmed, and I felt, okay, what am I going to communicate with my eyes? And I tried to communicate that I surrendered and I loved him. And he took his hands like this, and he shook his hands like this. And the car drove off, and I just stood there for a long time crying. Yeah. It was like in that moment, he was coming for me. Now he's got me, and he grabbed me very, very tight with that look, with that vision that he gave me, that he opened up.
So beautiful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So I guess I'm going to ask you, after coming and being a very young devotee. I know there were a lot of challenges in your life, and it would probably take a week of 24-hour, 7, just be, just to hear all of the challenges you've been through, but maybe to pick the most prominent challenges or the ones that you would like to share as the part of the Sadhaka's journey of having to go through challenges to upgrade their devotion.
Yeah, it's almost like, which lifetime do you want to talk about? Because it feels like many lifetimes, that in this life has been, and because you've been on the journey with me since 1980.
Yeah, a long time.
So
Yeah.
and what is, but it does really feel as though it's been numerous lifetimes that have been lived, and each one has had a kind of death and then a slow birth into the next one. And each one has brought powerful lessons in dissolving the ego and really going through the anartha-nivritti, which seems to be a very long, painful process. One we can't avoid, but one that is not easy, and it seems like it goes on and on for a long time. I would say that, so which one is the most, it's, in one way, I could say one is more impactful than another, but honestly, these tests have built on each other, and they have all been like acid tests, like each one going through like a living hell. From relational issues to being abused by authorities in ISKCON, to being dismissed because of having a woman's body and not being allowed to do the services. I mean, it sounded like I did a lot of services from that bio, but I was prohibited from doing a lot of services that I would have liked to do and offered as a seva. So, and then, raising a child that chose a different path and was in really severe difficulty, really crisis, so which crisis was more profound? They were all difficult, and they all had a very specific purpose. And I will say that we have a few minutes. So what I will say is that the one that was the biggest test, in my estimation, brought me to the point where I was ready to re-look at my commitment to Krishna consciousness, to bhakti. And I thought maybe I made a mistake when I was 16, and I was very angry. I became very angry at Krishna. I became very doubtful of Prabhupada about some of the choices that he had made in guiding ISKCON. And I was in a very, very dark place. So, and this went on for some time, some years. I held on to the chanting, but barely. And the chanting, I wouldn't say was all that attentive, but I felt like until I had made a decision that for sure I was leaving Krishna consciousness, I shouldn't give up the chanting, because I felt like that would be a way to clarify So so you see some faith still remained, but the faith was very deeply shaken. And so what I did is I went back to studying a lot of the different paths, and I went back and looked at a lot of different books, and like where would I go if I was giving up the path of bhakti. And I went through this intellectual exercise where I said, well, okay, there's atheism, but that just didn't ring for me. And then there's agnosticism, and that also wasn't, I just couldn't intellectually support either one of those positions. And so then I was thinking of, Buddhism and impersonalism, and get away from a personal God, maybe it'll be a little easier. He's a little heavy on you. So I looked at impersonalism, but when you think about it, it's not a very rich worldview and offering that, I just felt it's only partial. Once you're exposed to Gaudiya Vaishnavism, then you see how these other paths represent just a portion of the absolute truth. So that wasn't working. Then I was looking at the Christian mystics and the Sufis and the mystics in the different tradition. But I came back to there's threads of bhakti here, but the fact is that they are that Gaudiya Vaishnavism has this wealth of information, and when you come down to it, what is it saying? It's saying God is a lover, God is joyful, God is a youth. And I'm like, that's a really beautiful but seems reasonable perspective on the absolute, that why would he would be youthful, he would be happy, he would be loving. And so I just was like, okay, I can't quite cut the cord with bhakti, but it's not a blue God, and I don't believe in Krishna. So I had this real standoffish, and I even would say, I'm not making one more step toward you until you make a step toward me. And just this deep crisis of faith that was very unbecoming and unfortunate. And then I had an experience one day that spoke more toward the heart. And I was in my temple room, and I had just placed many fragrant flowers. It was spring, and I'd placed many fragrant flowers around the altar, and they smelled very beautiful. And I was cleaning the room, and I felt like it was a wholesome atmosphere, and cleaning felt good to me. And all of a sudden, all the memories of the moments of my seva or chanting that had transported me flooded me, like almost threw me on the ground with so much power. The moment that Prabhupada looked at me in the eye, what happened in that moment, my experience of sitting with him in the temple room, my experience of being on book distribution and transcending the body so completely that I never wanted to come back into the body, because you were just a member of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan party, and you had left the planet Earth. And the time that I sat down with my japa beads and had a very deep experience of being a spiritual soul, not the body. All these moments that were so profound, they just flooded me. And I just went, oh my God, I can't deny this. And the books, the way they came to me and how they called to me in that store, and how they followed me around the world, and how Prabhupada saved me, and the services that I did, and the association that I had, and it became no longer an intellectual exercise. It was grounding back into, I experienced this. This is real. And I am not going to deny this real experience. And so that was a transformative moment where I just said, okay, take back up. And I still had a standoffish attitude for a few years. And I went through another couple of crises after that main one, which had set me into that really dark place. And I had to deal with those crises. They were consuming crises, helping other people live through attempted suicide and harming each other, and then getting my granddaughter when she was 2 years old and raising her for some years. It was extremely taxing. And I knew at that time that I was trying to make my way to hear from Tripurari Swami. I had spoken with you a few times, and I had said, do you think that I could have a conversation with Maharaj? Because I remember him from book distribution days. And I mean, he was a prominent member. He was an upstanding person that was highly regarded all over the movement, all over the world. And ISKCON no longer was working for me. My faith had been too decimated. I didn't have a place. I lost a lot through the tests. And that was one of the tests, was to individuate away from the institution, where my whole identity was part of an institution. And I realized that's not bhakti. And I have to come to bhakti on my own. Anyway, so I wanted to make that journey to hear from Tripurari Maharaj and visit you. And finally, after 5 years of a very awful situation, I was able to do that in 2013, and had just another like aha moment, where I sat there and I was like, oh my God, I didn't, now we're running out of time, but part of the journey was I had this idea of a preaching program called the Bhakti Campaign. And I presented it to the BBT trustees in 2002. And it was a marketing idea where we would get devotees to write books for an outside audience that would be relevant and relatable to it. Because I felt so strongly, Prabhupada impressed on us, preach to your American brothers and sisters. And the institution had been serving to a large degree Indian-bodied people who have an obvious connection to Krishna consciousness and come very easily. But Prabhupada wanted us to preach to our brothers, your Westerners. So I felt like we were lacking in that, and that we had missed the boat, so to speak. Like ISKCON had practically made vegetarianism popular in North America, but we've never been credited for that, for the beautiful Sunday feasts that Prabhupada started, and the Food for Life programs, and how we brought that into the awareness of the American public in a really big way. So I felt we should not lose that opportunity with the term bhakti. I wanted to make that a household word that people would know, defined according to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And so the Bhakti Campaign was to find authors to write books, put them on a speaking circuit along with kirtan. Now, this was before bhakti and kirtan entered the yoga asana community. This was before that happened. And when I presented that to the trustees, they were like, wow, yes, let's do this. And so I said, I need $500,000 and I'll do it. And they immediately formed a division of BBT, and I was the co-manager of that with another devotee for 5 years. But the funds were not forthcoming, and the co-manager wanted to do many other things. They wanted to raise funds. They wanted to develop an editorial department to encourage writers. They wanted to raise friends. They wanted to do all these things that we had to do the groundwork first before we got to the Bhakti Campaign. And after 5 years, I just said, okay, this isn't happening. And we had actually looked quite extensively within the devotee community in ISKCON for writers. And for one reason or another, we weren't finding them. So I resigned in 2007 from that initiative. And I felt like really the BBT was my last hope. I felt like I didn't have a place in ISKCON. BBT was my last hope for a place. And it was finished. It wasn't. So I really felt like, where's my seva? And that's when the little voice came and said, write. And I went, oh no, I don't know how to write. No, I'm not writing. That's not going to work for me. And anyway, I went on this long journey of trying to learn to write because this voice would not give up. It was not stopping. And I was trying to push it away and it wouldn't go away. So, but I was having a hard time coming up with the angle to present Krishna consciousness, the angle to present bhakti that would be breaking through dogma and the strict rules that I felt so, and the sectarianism that I had felt and I had become very burdened with. And I had been working through removing all the ISKCONisms out of my vocabulary. And I was trying to find words, like I was coming up with the phrase conscious heart. And then I was talking about the feminine divine and I was blogging, but it wasn't coming together. It wasn't gelling. It was like I was blocked. And I remember telling girlfriends, I don't have the vocabulary. I can't write. And my writing mentor is a Buddhist and she can't quite get what we're talking about in bhakti, and the depth of it and the gems and the beauty. And how am I going to do this? And so I sat down in that class with Swami Tripurari and I was like, oh my God, there it is. I've been looking for this for like 15 years. And I could not believe how he moved me. I was not expecting, I wasn't going up there thinking, okay, I'm going to be like a follower of Tripurari Swami, and this is going to be, I was hurting, so I needed some good association, but I wasn't thinking, in fact, I was very guarded given all my experiences. I was like, this is not necessarily we're going anywhere here. I'm just checking things out.
Just coming for a little visit.
Well, I'm just coming for a visit. And the first class, I was like, oh my God, Krishna. And I went up to him and I said, Maharaj, could you write a book for an outside audience? It's just so powerful the way you speak. And how you relate in such freshness, bhakti, and the path, and the theology, and the philosophy. And he said, no, my service is to serve the practicing devotees, and those who hear from me should write. But I heard that and I thought, I really can't write, but he said that at the time. And then I was going to I had an idea, well, I'll take his work and put it into a book because his work is so beautiful. And so I started transcribing his contemporary talks and I spoke with him about that and he encouraged me. And so I was going to gather the essays together and put them together. But when I started writing them, putting them together, I felt that there were holes and I needed to fill in the holes. I don't know, I had this idea. And anyway, that initial project didn't come out. And then Wise Love came out as based very strongly on his contemporary talks, but writing in my own voice and not, my idea was just to transcribe and then edit and print those, but I wound up not able to do that. I wrote from scratch, but drawing heavily from his his teachings and the way he spoke about it. And so that's how Wise Love came out. And I feel very indebted to Swami Tripurari. I feel my life is very enriched. I feel like the acid tests that I went through were preparing me to be able to really take advantage of his association so that I could be elevated further in my progress. And I feel that has occurred in a significant way.
Yeah, so being able to hindsight, see where you've come and then see all those really difficult, challenging, dark nights of the soul, and seeing how they always, and every devotee who has done this can see if they get far enough along, and forward, how all those things serve to bring them to a higher level and really deepen their commitment to bhakti and their practices. And so I've certainly seen that in you. Just your practice, how deep you've gone in your practice in the last years, and then these books that are coming out, and your ability, Krishna's empowered you in such an amazing way to write those bridge books that you dreamt about other devotees writing, and Krishna had you on his agenda to be the author.
I had no clue.
No, you had no clue. And so all those times that, he made things difficult, it was to prepare you for this and your deepening sadhana. And yeah, it's really been, for me, a real honor and privilege to know you.
Oh, Archana.
And seriously, because I'm just, I feel like I don't push myself so much, I'm like, I get ideas and I start things, but I'm not great always at the follow through. And so to actually have a friend that takes things from point A to point Z and just can push through all kinds of obstacles. I mean, it's very inspiring. I don't have that nature. And so that's not going to be my contribution in this lifetime, but to see someone that has that and just how much you have helped so many people in a big way and on a very micro, I'm a macro level, I'm more micro. I do helping on a micro level and you do it.
Well, one thing, just to put things into perspective, because that bio was very long and you're now trying to glorify me a little over the top here. So I'm going to say one thing is that, we have our strengths and we have our weaknesses. And oftentimes our strengths are also our greatest weaknesses. And so I'll tell you this funny story. I've told you this before, Archana, but I'll share it with others. My mother said that when I was born, the doctor held me up and my head was completely straight and my eyes were completely open and I was clearing my throat and looking around. I was standing. They didn't have to clear my throat. I was clearing my throat myself as I was born. And I was standing at 4 months. I was walking at 8 months, and people would think that it was like a wind-up doll because I was so short and thin, because I was only a few pounds, but I was walking with little curly hair, and they thought it was like a toy doll because I was so small walking. And then I potty trained myself at 10 months because I wanted to wear the little white lace panties. So at 10 months old, I wanted to wear lace panties. and so I potty trained myself. So, I mean, this is like some karmic thing coming from the past. And it's also been my greatest nemesis where, I'm pushing through when I need to pull back and listen and slow down and go deep instead of doing, because I felt like I had to accomplish. It meant so much to me in terms of psychologically my self-worth, but I had to give back to Prabhupada. I had been given so much, and I still feel that way. Anyway, so as much as it's been good, it looks good because then you can do a lot of external services. There's problems with it, and so just to keep it into perspective, I thought to share that. And it seems like few people have questions. Maybe we should not talk anymore and take questions.
Let's take the questions. Well, one of the questions, Sakirati, I think you already answered her question. Please share with us how your experience when you've met Guru Maharaj and connected to him. So you have addressed that. Krishna Kumari said, thank you for sharing your amazing journey. I think my question is similar to Nanga Manjari Dasi. I didn't see her question. Okay. How has your practice grown and changed since your association with Sri Chaitanya Sangha? How have you harmonized your ISKCON experience to where you are now? Hope this makes sense.
So I have always been a person that is very self-reflective and seeking honesty and living honesty. So that brings in a degree of internal aspect to one's sadhana that's very powerful. And Swami, hearing from Swami and receiving his guidance and his association has set that into deep waters, that tendency, and shown me practical ways to, well, it's even more than practical ways. I mean, he gives practical ways, but his company has lifted me it lifted me spiritually. It's like someone who's more advanced than you can do that, and he has done that. And as that has happened and continues to happen, my sadhana goes deeper and deeper, and I'm reaching experiences in my sadhana that I've never had before. And I attribute that to his association. And how I have harmonized my experience with ISKCON, you know, that's where I was born and raised. You know, Prabhupada saved me, and I was able to serve his preaching mission. As Swami said, Prabhupada had us in this position of you just whatever we're told to do, we would just do. And that experience was very profound in the formation of who I am, and the experience of being in an ashram and just being willing to do whatever, whenever, at any moment, this changes, that changes. And then developing lifelong friendships. I mean, we've known each other for 37 years, more than that. Something, almost 40 years. Yeah.
Over 40 years.
Yeah, over 40 years. So, I mean, and you're my closest friend. I mean, that happened in ISKCON, you know. So I feel privileged and honored to be able to have rendered service in that pioneer movement of bringing Krishna consciousness to the West. I feel grateful. It's not too hard to harmonize.
Yeah.
I mean, I see what it was. For a while, I was very heartbroken. I mean, absolutely devastated with what has gone on in ISKCON, and where I think it's gone off and the problems. And then at the same time, I see it's really helping a lot of people still. So it's mixed, and I am no longer, I feel a little distant, but my friends are still members, active members of ISKCON. My husband is the manager of Back to Godhead magazine and has been for 37 years. And he's very, very much an ISKCON, a prominent ISKCON member. And I just have no problem being in both worlds. I'm looking forward to seeing the sectarianism and the bigotry and the sexism of ISKCON ending, so that the sanghas can come together for spreading bhakti in a deeper way. Because through the association of people at Sri Chaitanya Sangha, I've come to see the whole Gaudiya Vaishnava world, which is quite broad beyond ISKCON, and I was vaguely aware of it, and now I am more intimately aware of it, and the sincerity of these devotees, and the love and the spirit of people in ISKCON and quote outside of ISKCON is just tremendous. So I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime, but I'm so looking forward to the possibility of cooperation and some maturity growing in some of the members of ISKCON.
Thank you. Very beautiful, comprehensive answer. Omkar has a question.
Haribol, Pranad, thank you for sharing your beautiful journey.
Hare Krishna. We're going to see
my
you in North
question-
Carolina, I heard.
Yeah, soon, in
Okay.
a little over a couple of weeks.
Okay. Looking forward to meeting you there.
Likewise. My question is in regards of thank you for that intimate share of your experiences with Srila Prabhupada and how it transformed your life and those experiences. And that type of experience, I guess, is you shared it so nicely and fluently and sort of in a manner that it's very inspiring to me, and I'm sure for others as well. But I'm wondering that, having had such an experience with Srila Prabhupada, that would be really such a confirmation of and faith building experience, would that be something that you, at an ongoing base, sort of reinvent your sadhana around, or is it how would that affect do you have to kind of go back to it, or is it something that transformed you in a way that, I don't know if it's too private, don't feel pressure of sharing, but
No.
some words maybe.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. Like that, I explained that moment that Prabhupada looked me in the eye was, it saved my spiritual life when I went through really serious crisis. So it was there, and it always kind of held me, and then it saved me. But spiritual life is not static, it is dynamic. And so many people had that association with Prabhupada and then left him. So it's not just that you had that association and then you're going to be carried. It's up to us to invest ourselves, and it's on a daily basis. That's my experience. It's not just this week or this month, but on a moment, it's becoming more profound for me, this moment to moment moving into meditation and understanding my insignificance, my dependence, my intensifying desire to be of service, to one day directly serve the prince of Vraja and the daughter of Vrishabhanu Raj. And it's just, it's ongoing. I mean, and that's what Swami talks about. It's an eternal becoming. So that's my experience, is that it's not only, it's becoming more and more, not less and less. More and more is asked of me, and more is given, and through the association of devotees, I'm shown. I'm kept in check and balances. And tell me if that answers what you were looking for. Is that addressed?
Yeah, well, thank you. That was far more than I was expecting that you'd say. I wasn't expecting anything, but thank you. That was wonderful. Yeah. That's I relate with that we have to still put the effort no matter what we experience. I think that's a really, really beautiful point. And I mean, your experience says everything, right? So
yeah, we can't. It's never going to be that we just rest at a certain point. I mean, it's kind of it's like, sorry guys, but we're not going to just rest and relax here. This is a full-on commitment, and it takes every ounce of everything we've got to come to the point of giving our very self, and with love. And it's just incredibly beautiful, but also asking everything. And if you slide along for a little while, you're just going to have to make up time, lost time. And the more I'm practicing, and the longer I just, like, I'll tell you one thing. I pay obeisances to Prabhupada in the morning, and I go back to that experience as a child, feeling I could miss my opportunity in this life for the absolute truth. I can't begin to explain to you what an existential crisis those 8 years were until I read Prabhupada's books. It was a very deep samskara, let's put it that way. And so that samskara stays with me, and I think I've got to be serious. I can't lose this opportunity. Like, Prabhupada came to San Francisco when that prayer started, and I feel like I only saw Prabhupada one time, and I feel like my trajectory just barely touched his, and then he was off, and I've been here without him for all this time. And then it took decades to be moved in a similar way through hearing from Tripurari Swami. And it's like, this is so rare and it's so precious. And how do I don't want to miss any chance here on a daily basis. And it just brings me to tears every morning when I pay obeisances, like, how this is so urgent. This is just so urgent.
Wow, how valuable. Well, how valuable. That's something to aspire for. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Nice to meet you. Hare
Me
Krishna.
too.
Sorry. So Pranada, there's one more question in the chat from Ram Mohan. You want to ask your question?
Pranams, Pranada, Haribol. Thank you for, I'm sorry, I missed the first half of the interview, so I apologize if my question was covered during that time. I'm curious about your name. It's partly because I'm half French and it's French sounding. So.
Oh, okay. I thought you were asking me about Pranada, because there's a story about Pranada.
I'd like to know both. Yeah, please.
Nagaraj Prabhu, my husband, is French Canadian, and that's how it's comme toi. And but when I received the name Pranada, all the women at the fire sacrifice that I was in received the name of the Ganges. So Vegavati, Gangagati, Janeshwari. And I really wanted to have a name of Radharani, because, that's what women want to do. They want to have a name for Radharani. And they said Pranada. I went, oh my God, that's awful. I hated that name. And I went up and I looked, they had the names posted on the prasadam room door. And I looked at my name and I was like, oh my God, I really hate that. And I would hear people say that name. And I was just like, oh, that's really a gross name. Anyway, it took me some years to get used to it, like a lot of years, like maybe 25 years. And Prabhupada had named 2 disciples, Pranada, myself, and a man. And I thought it was like a man's name. I was like, why did they give me this name, Pranada? And then in the last 10 years, prana means life air, and da means one who gives. So it means the servant of one who gives life air. And in the last 10 years, I've heard now, it's a name for Srimati Radharani, who gives life air to Krishna. It's a name for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who gives life air to the jivas. It's a name for Krishna, who gives us life air. I was thinking, wow, what a far out name.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you so much. And I didn't know you didn't like your name for all that time. I had a hard time. New insight for me, and that you come to understand it in a deep, beautiful way in the last few years, last 10 years. So I think on that note, we have Omkar put amazing in the chat. So I think maybe you could just give, just as a closing remark, the most valuable thing that you've learned in your 47-year journey as a sadhaka, that you would, something valued, just a gift in like a few short sentences.
I think that the greatest gift is the holy name, and holding firm to that holy name through anything is the most important conversation we will have in our life. It is putting us in the position of being guided directly by Krishna, and he does guide, he does answer. He has saved me numerous occasions. And I feel that really it was through the holy name directly that the relationship has developed and is possible. And I feel just overwhelmingly grateful for Krishna's holy name.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Pranada. And I apologize to everyone for not telling you who the interviewee was going to be this week. We had to keep that. I had to keep it a secret until this morning when I asked Pranada to do it, so that she would be able to do it without overthinking it and getting an anxiety about it. So
too much anxiety. I can't speak in public.
So it worked out, and I'm so happy, but I do apologize for not, usually we send out some notices about the call, and we weren't able to do that this week. So anyway, we've got this beautiful interview up on Sri Chaitanya Sangha for however long this technology is still available. Yeah, just very grateful. I think what you shared today will really inspire a lot of devotees and give a lot of hope to know that you can go through some really, really dark, really hard crises, and if Krishna will help you through it. And thank you, and we look forward to all your other books that are coming out, and hopefully the memoir. We'll talk more about that.
We'll see if I have the courage to do the memoir.
All right, my dear devotees, in the next month, we will not be doing the interviews. There'll be special classes all throughout March for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we'll resume our interviews in April. So thank everybody for your participation and your support. And it's wonderful when you come on. It's so nice to have some people to actually look at while we're doing the interview. Jai.